really quickly that the words I say aren't mine and that they're from God. And I apologize if I sprinkle some of myself in there and um I guess ruin it being authentically from God. But either way, disclaimer out of the way. Uh, so the service is, I mean, the talk's going to be about enjoying service, and I put this verse here, even though most of the verses we're going to talk about are from the Old Testament, but I think this is a good like theme, so to speak. Uh, like this verse from John 15:15, which I think is an easy way to remember it. No longer do I call you servants, for a servant does not know what his master is doing, but I have called you friends, for all things I heard from my Father I made known to you. So the theme, so to speak, is kind of when we serve, transitioning from servants to friends of God and actually making a relationship with Him. Because I think that's how we can get true enjoyment out of it. So I put this like fifth grade presentation slide here just so that everyone kind of gets an idea of like what we're going to talk about. So first I'm going to try and go over what I think stops us from really enjoying service. And then how can we actually enjoy service? And then these last 2 points are super brief. Uh, it's just talking about like what do we do when things go wrong? Because that happens all the time in service, and sometimes it's hard to enjoy something that's not going right. And then, like, what's the point of even talking about all this? So to answer your question, Shady, the way I was thinking about going about it is to mainly look at it through the lens of Ecclesiastes, uh, because there is, I put I don't know if you guys can see my mouse, but I put a QR code here for this talk I heard a long time ago. The talk is actually about Job. It has nothing to do with what we're talking about, but in it, and this link will take you to that point in case you're curious. Abuna talks about how the five books of wisdom and what they talk about. Job is about how to endure. Psalms is how to pray. Proverbs is how to act. Ecclesiastes is how to enjoy, and Song of Solomon is how to love. So because also I read it recently, I thought it would be a good way to a good lens to look through. Okay, so what stops us from enjoying service? I put all the photos here on the corner. I wish I made this PowerPoint more fun, especially like from a talk about enjoying service. It should be more fun, but I most of my time for this talk was spent on research, and this PowerPoint was come together. So I still think it's kind of fun. But either way, that's neither here nor there. So what stops us from enjoying service? I think to answer this question, we can look at this verse from Ecclesiastes. Then I looked in all the works that my hands had done, and on the labor in which I had toiled, and indeed all was vanity and grasping for the wind. There was no profit under the sun. And there are these two reflections on this verse that I thought were relevant. They're kind of long, so I'm just going to focus on the parts highlighted. So Didymus the Blind says, a person who is enlightened by the sun of righteousness is not under it, but in it. Sort of to say that when we are under the sun, we're sort of separating ourselves from righteousness, separating ourselves from God, so to speak. And I guess that could be defined by um, concentrating on earthly actions, not really focusing on how, like in service, this affects me, affects the things around me, but separate from God, sort of. Not really taking God into the mix, not really seeing Him in my service, but really I'm under Him, not in Him as we're supposed to be. Um, and Gregory of Nyssa also talks about how in the same in the same way all enjoyable interest and activity disappears with its accomplishment. When the activity ceases, the enjoyment too is wiped out, and nothing is stored up for the future, nor is any trace or remnant of happiness left to the pleasure takers when the pleasant activity passes away. I thought this reflection was like super relevant. He literally talks about how sometimes when our service is separate from God. It's the enjoyment of it is also it's fleeting. It's not substantial. It's in the moment and it goes away, and then afterwards it's gone and it sort of seems pointless. And that's why I put this picture of a sandcastle here. This this quote, I think, really represents just service without really seeing God. It's like building a sandcastle. In the moment, you think it looks nice, and then a wave will come and just destroy it. And then you're wondering what was the point of that? It's gone now. And at least for me, there's no wonder that when that happens, I feel reluctant to go back to serve. It's that enjoyment isn't true joy. It's kind of just fleeting. And what's cool is there's Jesus actually directly answers this, I think. He like he says, "Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." And I put this the screenshot of the definition of heaven from sainttekla.org. And heaven is the place or state where God dwells. And I think that's important to remember. It's not just some really cool place and God happens to be there. No, it's defined by where God is. And so when we lay up for ourselves our treasures in heaven, and when we think of service as us going and building up that treasure in heaven, it sort of orients ourselves to think that we're going to serve, and when we serve, we're going to meet with God. We're going to be where He dwells, and we're trying to be in His presence. So I think I kind of butchered that a bit, but Pope Shenouda says it a lot better than me. He says, "You spent your life serving the house of the Lord. When will you serve the Lord of the house?" And there's a link to the reflection of this, but he basically talks about how sometimes when we serve, we miss the point in that we give God our effort, we give Him our time, we give Him our money, but we don't give Him our hearts. We don't actually develop this close relationship with God. Um, and that misses the point. We can go and serve and come back and never truly have met God. We can go pray in church and leave as if God was not there. And all of that is pointless, and it we don't get true joy out of it because like Solomon said in that verse, it's all vanity and it goes away. It's fleeting, just like that sandcastle. It has no strong basis, and when a wave comes, it goes away. And I thought something that was interesting is that Pope Shenouda in this talk, he mentions that even Saul met Christ on his way to Damascus, and he was trying to persecute Christians. And so in a way, Saul may have been approaching service in a matter more aligned with God's will than me. Not to say that we should go and obviously what he was doing wasn't right, but I think it speaks more to the fact that service is more about meeting God than what we're doing. And when we do go and develop that relationship with God, then that's when we get the true joy out of it. And we just celebrated St. Moses the Strong's feast recently. And I think the same could be said about him. Even though he was still a robber, he wanted to see God. And from that's when he was able to develop that real relationship with him. So how do we go and see God? How do we enjoy service? Uh, I have my notes on the side here, so if I look away, it's not because I'm upset, it's because I'm trying to look at my notes. So to enjoy service, there's a few things, at least that I was able to get out of Ecclesiastes that talks about this. The first being, don't seek to be alone. So actually, does anyone else want to read this verse and read the sort of reflections that St. Basil and St. Gregory have on it? Okay, I'll do it. So Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verse 9 to 10 says, two are better than one because they have a good reward for their labor. For if they fall, one will lift up his companion. But woe to him who is alone when he falls, for he has no one to help him up. St. Basil says about this, but life passed in solitude is concerned only with the private service of individual needs. This is openly opposed to the law of love, which the apostle fulfilled, who sought not what was profitable to himself, but to many that they might be saved. Moreover, the majority of the commandments are easily observed by several persons living together, but not so in the case of one living alone. For while he is obeying one commandment, the practice of another is being interfered with. St. Gregory says, apart from these, there are those who stay in their own houses and still others who consider being unsociable and brutish a virtue without recognizing the command to love and without knowing the fruit of I think it's meant to be long suffering, guilty. Um, so I think what we can get from this is that a life of solitude is a life where life is not practiced. When we go to service and we we don't actively practice loving others, but instead maybe we stay to ourselves, we kind of try and do our own things, we try to work by ourselves, we don't try and work together in a team. We kind of miss the point in that sense because we don't get to practice loving each other. We miss out on the ability to practice many of the commandments, like love your neighbor, do these to the least of Christ's brethren. Christ's brethren also include your fellow servants, those um who follow his word. He also calls those his brothers and sisters and his mothers. And so it's important that when we're in service, we try and actually practice loving each other and that we try not to be alone and we try and be with each other. Because in doing so, we get to practice those commands, practice love, and God is love. And so that's an opportunity to see Him in service, in the love of each other, and of course, the love of those we are serving. We should actively try and talk with them and be friends with them. There's also, I feel like, this idea in our faith that you get what you give. And if you don't have someone to give to, then you get nothing. If you don't practice loving someone and giving them joy, you won't get that joy, or you miss at least the opportunity of getting that joy back in return. And then that's a missed opportunity to enjoy service. This applies spiritually also. So, in a spiritual sense, this is a call to be friends with God, which is what Pope Shenouda said is important. And we see that with St. Paul. He says, at my first offense, no one stood with me, but all forsook me. May not be charged against them. But the Lord stood with me and strengthened me so that the message might be preached fully through me, and that all the Gentiles might hear. Also, I was delivered out of the mouth of the lion. This was actually, if you guys remember the verse it was a verse in the Bible study in the convent. And we see here that even though he was alone, St. Paul wasn't alone. The Lord was with him. Uh, Also to look at this spiritually, a bit more like after that last verse in Ecclesiastes, there's verse 12 says, though one may be overpowered by another, two can withstand him, and a threefold cord is not quickly broken. The Orthodox Study Bible, I love that book, by the way. I think it has a lot of knowledge, and I would recommend it for everyone. But it mentions that the threefold cord could be a reference to virtues, faith, hope, and love, which is a reference to 1 Corinthians 13:13. Again, that's an easy verse to remember. And now abide in faith, hope, love, these three, but the greatest of these is love. And if we take the spiritual meaning, then this is also a call of working on our spiritual life and once again, developing that relationship with God. God is love, and we should practice loving Him. And we already know that He loves us in return. A really cool, like this reminds me of something I heard in a video once. Someone was saying, I know, I know that God is in love with me. I pray that I can be in love with Him. And I think that's a beautiful sentiment. And it's important as well in our faith because it leads to us not being quickly broken. And when you're not quickly broken, then you can go through all the struggles and serve happily, knowing that you have God's love with you. Um, Also, something that's cool is I think this would also explain the life of Desert Fathers like Abba Anthony and Abba Paul and so many others, because coupled with this verse, by this verse I mean this one, two are better than one, where we know that the reflections are saying you shouldn't be alone. We see just how literal our friendship with God can be, because at least for me, when I first saw that verse and I saw what Saint Basil and Saint Gregory were saying, the first thing I thought of was the Desert Fathers. Like, well, are they not alone? But should we like, how come they're okay to be alone and here it's not? But I think it actually talks to how literal a friendship with God can be, and it's not just some symbolic thing, but truly you're not alone when you develop that friendship with God. Uh, yeah. So another point that I personally got out of Ecclesiastes on how we can enjoy service is not to be idle, not to be lazy. Um, there are three verses here that I think talk on this. The first one, if you see the oppression of the poor and the violent perversion of justice and righteousness in the province, do not marvel at the matter, for high official watches over high official, and higher officials are over them. Um, I think here it clearly says that it's it's not right just to watch. It's not good to just marvel at a matter, but instead get involved. Don't just be idle. And also what I think is interesting is it talks about the oppression that you see, and what I see is different than what you see, what Sherry sees, what Esther sees, what anyone else sees. What God lets me see or what God shows me is different than what God will show other people. And I think that speaks to how our service is different from each other. My way of getting involved, my way of not being idle, what God wants me to do is going to be different than what my fellow servant is called to do. And I shouldn't look at that. I should focus on the oppression I see. I should not marvel at what I see. Instead, I should get involved in that. And in doing so, I'll enjoy it more because it's something personal from between me and God. I'm building on that relationship. He shows me and I walk in the way that he wants me to walk. Also, because of laziness, the building decays, and through idleness of hands, the house leaks. This verse, I forgot to note it down, but there was on Katina, a church father who says that this, the house, so to speak, could be the church. And something I think, and anyone can jump in and tell me if you agree or not. Is cool about our faith is that there are these patterns that you can see, and where we talk about the church, that could also talk about the church in our hearts, the church in which God dwells in. And if you take it that way, I think that also says that out of laziness, that church can decay and it will leak, and there's no joy in decaying. A life of decay is just miserable. And I imagine that what would leak out of that house, that church of the soul, would be the Holy Spirit, and we would lose that connection from God. And then we lose the joy of being with Him. We don't get that friendship with Him. And then also the there is in the morning sow your seed, and in the evening do not withhold your hand, for you do not know which will prosper, either this or that, or whether both alike will be good. Um, I think what this says is it goes to the extent of how not idle we should be. We should never miss an opportunity to do good, whether in the morning or in the evening. And that good that we do isn't restricted to one thing, but instead it should be there's multiple examples of good that we should try to do. Sow your seed and not withhold your hand. Not being idle is, or getting involved is, there's so many ways to do it. And we should strive to take advantage of all of them because we don't know which one will prosper, either this or that, or whether all of them will. It reminds me of a talk that Yusuf gave during this Zoom meeting a while ago. He was saying that every day you don't serve, um, you miss that opportunity. There'll be others, but you won't get that one back. And so you should try as best you can to get as much of that as you can with discernment. And that's what this next slide talks about. So Ecclesiastes 9 to 10 says in chapter 9, verses 9 to 10 says, live joyfully with the wife whom you love all the days of your vain life, which he has given you under the sun, all your days of vanity, for that is your portion in life, and the labor which you perform under the sun. Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with your might, for there is no work or device or knowledge or wisdom in the grave where you are going. Didymus the blind says, may your actions be according to your ability. Do with your might. Act according to the might you have received. That might consist in the gifts of grace from the Holy Spirit. The one who has might and still does not increase his spiritual capacity does not use his might. The one, however, who forcefully does more than is right, not out of real desire, but out of ambition or for another reason, commits a sin. And that's why I was saying discernment here is important. The beginner acts like a novice, the one who has made progress like one who is on his way, the one who has reached perfection like one who is perfect. Thus, one has to act in accordance with one's ability. If you are not weak, do not act in a way that would diminish your ability to assert your will. On the other hand, do not attempt something which you cannot do. Uh, and to summarize that, in my opinion, I think it's basically saying, with the lots you were given in life, in in this example, in this verse, it talks about the wife whom you love. But I think this could talk about many things in which God has given us, many blessings in which God has given us, in which we should be taken care of, in which we should love. Um, we should we should make sure that we enjoy it the right way, and doing that is offering that to God, sort of seeing using it to develop that relationship with God through our service of enjoying that. Uh, and we should do it with our might, not with more than that, not with less. We should make sure that whatever we can do using what God has given us for God so that it's true enjoyment, we should be doing, and we should not waste that or do more than that. I sort of butchered that, but I think Didymus the Blind actually says it better than I can, so there's not much more I can add to that. The last point, and to be honest, I think this was the main thing I personally got out of Ecclesiastes. But it was originally going to be the first thing I talked about, but it's a bit more, uh, I guess, nuanced. But I guess I'll give it a shot of talking about it now. It's to accept God's gifts and ignore everything else. And hopefully, with these next few verses, we can sort of understand what that means. So here's why I've seen it is good and fitting for one to eat and drink and to enjoy the good of all his labor in which he toils under the sun all the days of his life which God gives him, for it is his heritage. As for every man to whom God has given riches and wealth and given him power to eat of it, to receive his heritage and rejoice in his labor, this is the gift of God. For he will not dwell unduly on the days of his life, because God keeps him busy with the joy of his heart. Ecclesiastes 5, verses 18 to 20. On this, Didymus the blind says, but he doubtless has a gift, whatever he can consume. If he has enough food to satisfy him and enough drink, this is a gift from God. But when someone eats and drinks more than necessary, then it is not a gift from God, but a gift from desire. If one takes the spiritual in the right way, it is finally the grace of his lot. Sort of to say that what God gives you and you are able to receive, and you do it the right way, as he says, uh, this is this is the grace of your lot, and this is where you will get true joy out of it. Whereas I guess the flip side of it, where or I'll read the verse. Ecclesiastes chapter 6, verse 1 to 2. There is an evil which I have seen under the sun, and it is common among men. A man to whom God has given riches and wealth and honor, so that he lacks nothing for himself of all he desires. Yet God does not give him the power to eat of it, but a foreigner consumes it. This is vanity, and it is an evil affliction. And St. Gregory says, the man who has borne without blame the name of father of very many children has spent a long life and has not had his soul filled with good for so long time, and has had no experience of death meanwhile. This man I should not envy either his numerous offspring or his length of days. Nay, I should say that the untimely birth that falls from a woman's womb is better than he. And Athanasius the Apostolic says, let none of us entertain the desire for possessions, for what gain is it to acquire those things which we cannot take with us? So, what I think is cool about these two verses is they same they talk about the same thing but different situation. The first one talks about how there is a man who has everything that God gives him, and he has the power to eat of it. When the other verse, it talks about a man who God has given so many things to, yet God does not give him the power to eat of it. And it talks about how when we have more than we can actually enjoy, more than we can actually use or dedicate to God, more than we can, as Athanasius says, um, more than we can take with us, then that is vanity and is a waste. And if it's a waste, then there's no joy out of it because we never got to enjoy it. It's not something we were able to, it's not something we had the power to eat of. But instead, when we accept God's gifts, dedicate them to God, and I've said that a lot, dedicated to God, but that what I mean by that is, um, it's a reference back to what Jesus said, where we lay up our treasure in heaven. Because what we dedicate to God is, in a way, us building more and laying up more treasure in heaven. It's more stuff that will never rust, never decay. It's stuff that we can keep with us. It and and that's the stuff that we can actually enjoy. It's not that sandcastle that's gonna wash away, but instead it's a legit castle that nothing can break down. So those gifts are what we should, I guess, seek, and those gifts are from God, and anything else should be ignored because if we seek other stuff, that's out of greed, and it's ends up being a waste, and no joy can come out of it. Uh, so another verse is this one. So I commended enjoyment because a man has nothing better under the sun than to eat, drink, and be merry. For this will remain with him in his labor all the days of his life, which God gives him under the sun. Ecclesiastes 8:15. So this, I think, talks more about actually accepting God's gifts and using it, as opposed to uh, being greedy with it. And what I mean by that is OSB is the Orthodox Study Bible. It makes a link to the parable of the rich fool in Luke chapter 12, 16 to 21, where eat, drink, and marry is also used there. But in there, it's used in a negative sense. For a quick recap of that parable talks about a man who his ground yielded a lot and he had so many crops. And so what he decided to do is build a bigger house and so he could store more crops if I'm remembering correctly. Someone can jump in and say it better if they want. And he says, if I remember correctly, what he says is have a bigger house, have more crops, and then I'll be able to eat, drink, and be merry. And then God says, "You fool," he dies, and then he never actually enjoys, he never gets to use his crops, which is this example. It's the evil under the sun that Solomon saw. And this speaks of serving your earthly wants. It through greed, as in instead of taking God's gifts and using them back to him, getting the joy out of it and using it to lay up that treasure in heaven and develop that relationship with God, be friends with him, see him in our service. Instead, we're greedy with it and we try and build it more here on earth. We try and save up so that we can be richer, so that later down the line I can eat, drink, and be merry in a more like greedy sense, where I can serve uh myself as opposed to serve God, which misses the point. Like Pope says, we're supposed to serve the Lord of the house, not the house of the Lord. Uh, and in doing that, we would be like the rich fool. We'd be rich here on earth, but we'd have nothing in heaven. And like Saint Ambrose says, the things which we cannot take with us are not ours. Only virtue will be our companion when we die. And there is, I guess, examples like I put this here. The Orthodox Study Bible mentions it, and I think it's important. There are examples where you have to save up. I'm not saying like everything you have, give away. Especially if you have a family, you would have to save up to take care of them, like Joseph did. When he stored up grain, it was for the benefit of a nation. But even then, I feel like you could say his ability to store up that grain for the nation was his gift from God, and he was giving it back to God by helping his people. Um, Also, there were a few, uh, I guess, reflections from church fathers that I saw that said, "Eat, drink, and be merry" can be taken as a reference to the Eucharist, where we eat the body of Christ, drink His blood, and we take joy in that. And that's also another call to using what God has given us, Himself, to be closer and to develop that relationship with Him, one which we can rejoice and be merry in. Uh, and this one also is speaks more to the ignore everything else. Uh, and I'm curious if what you guys think about this as well. So th this verse he says he has made everything beautiful in its time. Also, he has put eternity in their hearts, except that no one can find out the work that God does from beginning to end. My takeaway from this was that God has given us everything. He put eternity in our hearts, except that we can know his works. And when, like, to be greedy for that part that he didn't give us, that knowing of his works, that kind of personally reminded me of Adam and Eve. Uh, they had the whole garden except the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And in in their greed, um, and maybe ignorance, when they went for that one thing that God did not intend for them, well, we saw the consequences. Obviously, they lost the joy of paradise. They lost that connection and relationship that they previously had with God. They lost being in His image. They once again to go back to the like sort of link back to some of the stuff I said, is what Pope Shenouda said. They served themselves before serving God, and they they kind of lost that friendship with Him. And I think even the Tower of Babel sort of speaks to that, that there were people who wanted to go and they wanted to see God and they built this tower. They wanted to know what God did not reveal to them, not did not want them to know. And in doing so, they divided themselves and they caused more confusion and they lost the joy of being united with each other. I don't know if I'm being too on the nose with linking it back to joy, but I'm trying to like just show how it's still related to the topic of this talk. But yeah, this is to say that when we lose the joy of what God's given us when we look for the other stuff. When we go to service and we're not present in the moment, and instead we look for like we had this, at least I'll speak on my behalf. There was this one person I really wanted to talk to. This this one brother of Christ that I saw before. He's who I want to see. I got to see these many other people, but I instead I missed the opportunity to truly enjoy the conversation with them. And in the end, I don't find the brother of Christ I was looking for. And I missed up on the opportunity of truly of meeting Christ through those people that were in front of me. I kind of went, I looked for what God wasn't giving me in that moment. There is sort of this idea that we should be present and take what God gives us in the moment, sort of get rid of our expectations of what we're entitled to or what we should be seeing and just receive what God's giving us in the moment. Uh, a good someone who does this really well, I think, is Abuna Cyril. He's very in the moment. When he talks to you, he gives you his everything and he takes it like I think he takes it from God. I don't want to speak on his behalf. And he's really good at, I think, not looking for what's not in front of him. Instead, he takes everything as it comes. And I think the joy on his face speaks for itself. He's like one of the happiest people. So to summarize, I think all these verses from Ecclesiastes to me shows that Solomon really endorses enjoying things in our vain life when they're from God and when they're for God. There's it reminded me of this verse from Romans 8:28 where uh, St. Paul says, "And we know that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are the called according to his purpose." And who- did someone want to say something or okay, there's also the this verse, if the axe is dull and one does not sharpen the edge, then he must use more strength, but wisdom brings success. Um, I was actually going to remove this verse, but because I forgot to, I'll talk about why I put it in here. Um, to me, the sharpness of the axe is our connection with God. It's our relationship with God. And when it's dull, that speaks to how our relationship with God is not is dull. And so we end up needing to use more of our strength. And with a dull axe, there's not much trees you can cut, I guess. And it's kind of pointless. And it becomes tiresome to even try. But with wisdom and we know that sometimes God the Son is called wisdom. Um, that brings success. And if we have a sharp axe, our connection with God is sharp, it's strong. Chopping that tree becomes easy, and it's a joy to do. Uh, I don't know if you guys get that from this verse as well, but this was my takeaway. So what about when things go wrong? I was originally going to go into this a bit more, uh, but I realized that there's actually a lot that goes into this, and maybe someone else more equipped. And there's actually other talks that kind of goes into this as well. So it's just a slide, and I'll go over it really quickly. In the day of prosperity, be joyful, but in the day of adversity, consider surely God has appointed the one as well as the other. so that man can find out nothing that will come after him. I like the Orthodox Study Bible version as well. It's not the Old Testament and the Orthodox Study Bible is a bit different than the New King James Version. It says, "In the day of what is good, live in that goodness. But in the day of trouble, consider also that God made one harmonious with the other, that a man may not find out anything that will come after him." Uh, and I think we can look at the example of Job to truly appreciate this verse. We're, the reason why I like the Orthodox Study Bible version more is that it says that in the day of what is good and the day of trouble, they're harmonious with each other. They're both from God, and we should take it as such. And Job did that. Um, Even though we know that it was technically the devil that killed all of Job's son, got rid of all his possessions, who gave him boils. When Job talks about his affliction, he always talks about it being from God. He took everything that happened to him from God, and he brought it to God as well, unlike his wife. Um, there's a good case to say that like a really good case to say his wife suffered too. Those were her children as well. It's not easy to like that was probably her livelihood as well. She probably depended on him. And it's not easy to like she didn't get boils, but it's not easy to see your husband suffer like that. And she even says, "Curse God," like why are you doing this? But I think a big difference between Job and his wife is Job took his pain and he brought it to God. He accepted it and he brought it to God. And we saw how well that turned out for him in the end. God answered him, gave him, even though he doesn't tell him what happened to him, he still gave him an answer that was satisfying to him. Unlike his wife, who the last thing we see, like the last mention of her in the whole book, is uh her telling Job to curse God. Um, Kind of like to say, well, if you want, like if your reaction to suffering is to go away from God, then that's exactly what will happen. The book never mentions her again, and it's you, it, I think that's enough. Like that says enough that she's never mentioned again. As if I won't say God forgot her, but he kind of it might point to him giving her what she wanted. She wanted to split from him, and God gave her that. But it was Job who ended up really being satisfied in the end. At least it was Job that was mentioned to be satisfied. Uh, but yeah, I don't know if anyone else sort of sees it that way. Feel free to jump in if you have another take. But that was my sort of take to it, that when things go wrong, um, we should still take it to be from God and bring it to God. And even though we might not, I think it's fair not to enjoy it in the moment, but God will bring you joy after if you do that. So why is this important? Like who cares about enjoying service? Why don't I just suffer it and just do it? Uh, I think it's important because service in life, in the life of a Christian, should be synonymous. There shouldn't be, okay, here's the time where I serve. It's this 9 to 11 shift when I'm in Hamilton, and then when I go back home, I'll wait till next time. It's it's while you're in Hamilton, it's while you're in Toronto, it's while you're at home. There, life is service and vice versa. And so enjoying service is really about how to enjoy life. And the same way we're meant to develop that relationship with God in service, when we go to Hamilton, Toronto, we're going to go see God. We should be doing that in everything. Um, we should be doing that when we read our Bibles, when we're talking to people. So this other link I sent, it's from a podcast, Coptic Orthodox Answers. It's a really good YouTube channel. I recommend it for everyone. Uh, the talk was about secular entertainment and how to navigate it, but at the very end, Father Anthony Murad says something which is really cool. He says, My father of confession used to tell me when I was in school, he used to tell me, when you study, you are a priest, your books are the offering, your desk is the altar, you offer it to God. Sort of to like say that everything you do is to God, is for God. There is no difference between your secular life and your spiritual life. That sort of idea shouldn't be there. It should be your life with God. Um, yeah, and if anyone wants to watch the video, this link will take you to that moment, but I I recommend the whole video. Um, and yeah, I kind of butchered my way through that, but that's it. I still hope you enjoyed. And if anyone has any like comments or uh I like things to add, I this is definitely not exhaustive. Like the more I read about this, there was so much more to talk about, and there were more angles to approach it. Like the verse I brought up, Jesus was talking to the disciples. I think there's so much to learn from how the disciples became his friends. Like how did they enjoy time with Christ? There's a lot there as well. Um, we could look at St. Paul. There's just so much. It's definitely not exhaustive, but uh, hopefully there was. Yeah, I'm not sure what. I'll leave it to you guys if you have any questions, thoughts, comments. I talked enough.
Thank you so much, Mark. Guys, anyone has any questions for Mark? Any comments? Any suggestions? I did receive a message, Mark. Someone sent me saying they really like the sentence saying life is service and service is life, or vice versa. So enjoying service is enjoying life. That really stood out to that person that sent me that message. I personally, I think the one I need to work on, and I think also actually Michael Armenius touched on that point last time, Dr. Michael Armenius, when you said we sometimes not enjoy service because we are not present in the moment, like we're looking for what we don't have. Um, yeah, that's very true. Yeah, we're looking what's next. So yeah, I
Yeah,
agree with you. I agree with you. So much on that one. Maybe I personally need to work so much on that one. And you gave the best example, I guess. God bless Abuna Cyril. Yeah, no matter how big or how small the questions you're coming to him is or are, he would just give you his full attention, like no
yeah,
one else. Um, Something we need to learn from him. Um, Thank you again, Mark. Guys, any questions, please, or comments, please jump in because we want to move on with our next point. Hopefully, we can be done within the next 20 minutes or so. Um, Questions, concerns? How do I look at pain as as a form of service? Seems like this question is for me, or I'm not sure. So I can, how about, okay. So I received this private message saying, how do I look at pain as a form of service? I'm not sure. Are you referring to possibly, I think or someone is referring to how Job, like, can you can you again reflect what you meant by the example of Job? I think maybe that's what they mean. Like how is pain related to service? Or what did you mean by that part?
Oh, so yeah, I think I in this case I left it vague kind of on purpose because there's not because like mainly because there's so much to it in my humble opinion. But in the case of pain or suffering, um I I personally remember St. Paul when it comes to suffering more than Job. What I well, first, I guess because I brought up Job, I'll talk about him first, and then I'll talk about Saint Paul. But Job is actually one of my favorite characters in the Bible. He's so cool in my opinion. I There's so much to learn from him. But in and from his example, he brought it to God. He Even though he got dealt like the worst hand, I don't think there's anyone you can say like on purpose. Like I think that's the point. Suffered as much as Job, and in his complaint, he he says like, I wish I could talk to God. Like I wish there was a judge, and I can just sort of bring my problems to God and just ask for an explanation. And I think that's how pain helps with our service. It brings us to God only when we bring it to God and when we take it to be from God. If we take the example of Job's wife and we curse God, then like we get the pain but none of the good parts. It's like when a child is meant to be punished for doing something wrong. Instead of learning their lesson, they run away from home. It's like, well, like, that's you just got punished and you didn't get to learn from it. But there, that pain is, I think, a way that's meant to bring us to God. And also in Job, from my memory, Elihu, like I think, is like the last friend to speak to him, who actually says like the right things. He says something, I'm gonna super paraphrase, but he says something along the lines of God talks to us, but man doesn't listen, something like that. Like a lot of times God will talk to us and we'll miss it. And so sometimes, or at least my takeaway from it is that God gets a bit more involved, and that is what that pain is. So I don't know if I answered the question, but to sort of summarize, it's that pain, if you take it from God and you bring it to God, then that will, God will sort of give you the answer from it. It might take some time, and it might not be the answer you thought you were looking for, but it will be one you're content with and one you will learn from. And from that, you will enjoy future service a lot more. Uh, I think that happened with Job. I think in my life, I feel like that happened as well. Um, but I think for it to work, you have to take it to be from God, and you have to bring it to God. Is that a fair answer? I don't know if someone else also has uh like something to add to that. I feel like there's some people here who could add on to that better.
I mean, that person texted, they're fine. They're good with the answer. Thank you so much, Mark.
Okay.
Okay, any more questions before we go?